Morning, Eden. So, as you saw, the next subject is Klipa versus Kedusha. Now, Klipa and Kedusha are actually two terms that Alter Rebbe himself spends quite a bit of ink defining and translating. So, it's a little less challenging. But nonetheless, the definitions he gives are somewhat scattered throughout the book. And, we'll hopefully do the next, let's say, today and maybe tomorrow. It shouldn't take too long. Is to just kind of synthesize all these various different places throughout Tanya where he talks about what Kalipa and Kedusha are and give it a succinct way to think about it when we see the words. So where I want to start from is chapter 8, right at the beginning. And as we'll see, it's going to actually link to Shavuos. Page 33, 33, 32. So it reads as follows. Another thing about forbidden foods, which is why they are called Isser, forbidden food, which you already translated in the previous chapter. That the word Isser, which means forbidden, also means tied down, can't be elevated. Divine spirit, divine energy that's in creating that thing can't be elevated. So it's usser, it's trapped, it's tied down. So yes, considering sha'af misha'acha maichal Isser, even someone who ate non-kosher food, not knowing it was non-kosher food. Person had no idea. And he did so l'shem shemayim. And he ate the non-kosher food, thinking it was kosher, and had the full intention, I'm only eating because I want to be able to use the energy to serve Hashem. In order to serve God with the energy he gets from this food. And he indeed did so. He ate the food with the intention that this is good. He's going to be using the energy to serve Hashem. And then he did so. The kara, and he studied, vispal, and he davened, the koyach achilahi, with the power that he got from that eating. The energy that's in that food will not be elevated to being clothed. There's that word we learned in the elements of Torah and Tefillah, kamaya heter, like it would if it were kosher food. Because it's tied down by the other side by the three klippas that are impure. Meaning, right? Even though I went ahead and I actually, conventionally we think like this: you take the food, you use the energy, and the question is, what do you use the energy for? And what intention do you have to use with the energy? So says the Alter Rebbe, well, actually, there's something else here at play, which is what is the nature of the thing you're eating? So even if you actually had intention that you're going to be using the food to serve Hashem, and you did, because that food is inherently klipa, it can't get elevated, which is somewhat perplexing. Because why? Physically, the energy of this food was now put into Torah mitzvahs, was it not? And if I didn't know about it, I did nothing wrong. So where's the issue? Why can't the food be elevated?
Did something wrong.
I didn't know. I had no idea. I'm not held accountable for that. I had no idea it was non-kosher food, right? That's the scenario here. You had no clue that it was non-kosher. Found out 10 years later that the butcher wasn't selling kosher food. But for years I've been eating this because I assumed it was kosher, like everybody else. And I indeed had in mind that I'm not indulging, I'm doing this for the sake of learning Torah and studying, doing mitzvahs. And I did. So I used the energy. The energy went into me, and then that energy that went into me was used for service of Hashem. So where's the problem here? And indeed, in the interwar years, in the First and Second World War, I think in 1929, the previous Rebbe leaves Russia. After being arrested and released from his imprisonment, he leaves Russia. And he ends up in Poland, right outside of Warsaw, in a suburb called Otwock. And there, the previous Rebbe publishes a periodical called Atomim. Atomim, that was the name of the periodical. And it included in it manuscripts the previous Rebbe had from generations prior that he had published, stories, history, Chabad history, and as well as questions and answers in study of Torah, Hasidus in general, written by the readership and responded to by the readership or by the editors, by the local Rosh Hashiva, the local Mashpia, whatever it was. It was like a Torah periodical. It was meant for alumni of the Chabad Yeshiva system, but really anybody could have written it. And Rabbi Feinstein wrote in it. Famous Rabbi Feinstein. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein writes a letter to the editor, a letter to the readership, and this is his question. Why isn't the food elevated? The person did nothing wrong. He's not accountable. He had no knowledge of it being non-kosher. He did everything right. He had the intention they're going to serve Hashem with that energy, and he took the energy and he served Hashem. So why isn't the energy elevated? So that's it. The question is posted, and that's it. Years later, we find in the Rebbe's notes on Tanya, the Rebbe answers this question. I don't remember if he actually says if this question appears in Atamim written by a reader and I'm responding to it, or he just responds to the question. If I remember correctly, it's the latter. I think he just responds to the question, but it would seem like he's addressing this question. And essentially what the Rebbe says is as follows. The truth is, the question is not, why is it that when a person eats non-kosher without realizing it for the sake of serving Hashem and then does, why is it not elevated? That's not the real question. The question is when a person eats kosher food and has in mind that he's going to use the energy of the kosher food to serve Hashem and then does, why it does get elevated. That's the real question. The question is the other way around. Meaning, by nature, everything should be stuck in its nature. That's the nature of nature. Everything is stuck in its nature. So if the nature of something is to be in a state of klipa, then it shouldn't have no elevation. The fact that it ever does, that's the chiddush. So to ask why it doesn't get elevated when it's not kosher, that's not a question. The question is, how does Hashem even make such a thing? This great power that Hashem gives us, that even when it is kosher, we could elevate it. That's the real question. Not the other way around. Okay, so this helps us, gives us another window to appreciate what this means. What does klipa mean? Because what Deborah's positing is, and this is what Deborah's telling to think about it, is that it's a set of rules that are established in nature that by dint of its nature should not change. The fact that it's capable of changing, going from klipa and being elevated to some level of kedusha, that's the anomaly. That's the aberration from nature that Hashem puts a human being, a Jew in the world that's capable of breaking the rules of nature such that this thing which was in klipa is not going to become elevated. And therefore that will only happen if Hashem allows it to. So if it's not kosher, Hashem doesn't allow it, it won't be elevated. And that's not a question. That's nature. So let's unpack what that means and why it is. So why should we accept this as an axiom? It's something which is klipa, stuck in klipa really. So understand what this is. Yeah.
Implies that even the kosher food is technically klipa.
Correct. The kosher food is klipa. And really it shouldn't be elevated.
To get credit for the mitzvah.
Sure. That's not on the table here.
So the issue is not about
The issue is not about that.
the person and whether they get benefit
Correct.
from that. It's only whether a question of elevating that
Oh.
item.
Very good. So Rabbi Feinstein was looking at it as, what did the person do wrong? If the person does the right thing, then everything should be elevated. Why not? Isn't that the nature of the show? Person does something right. And Never's responding by saying that, well, that's great, the person doing everything right. But what is the nature of the things you're looking at? Just because you did everything right doesn't change the nature of things. Right?
Our job is to
The person will do everything right, and the car still doesn't work. Did you do something wrong? Because the nature of the car is it's not going to work. I'm sorry, this car's just not going to work. The fact that you did things right doesn't change it, right? So Kalipa is an inherent state of reality that just because you did everything right doesn't mean anything's going to change in that reality. And the fact that sometimes it does, that's the aberration. That you actually have the capacity to change nature. And something which was Kalipa, this kosher food that was Kalipa, now becomes Kedusha, now becomes holy because I used it for the sake of serving Hashem. That's the Chiddush, that's the novelty. And it's got nothing to do with whether you did anything right or wrong. So let's understand what that is. That's what I want to get to. So really, the definition of KELIPAH and Kedusha is directly given by the Alter Rebbe in chapter 6. And you can read it after, you'll see everything that I'm sharing with you is directly in there. And essentially, it's as follows. One of the foundations of Judaism in general, and Chassidus spends lots and lots of ink on the pages to elaborate on this concept, is the oneness of Hashem. The absolute oneness of Hashem. What does the oneness of Hashem mean? God willing, when we get to part 2 of Tanya Shaykh, we're going to spend a lot of time learning about that. But for the purposes of our conversation, what it means is as follows. We'll take it to 2 steps. Step 1 is the way oneness of Hashem is understood on a halachic level, which is where the Rambam defines it for us. Rambam, very briefly, he makes a distinction between what he calls, on the one hand, Aftos Morkav in Hebrew, which means a comprised oneness, versus an Aftos Pshuta, which means a simple oneness or an absolute oneness. What's the difference between a comprised oneness versus an absolute oneness? Comprised oneness is the way we know oneness in our realm of existence. Namely, anything you know of that you can identify as a singular item is made up actually of hundreds, thousands, millions, and probably trillions of other parts. This chair is a singular unit called a chair, but not really. It's comprised of cushions, of nails, of wood, of glue, of paint, of a designer. Each of those parts that I just described themselves are made up of tons of parts. Until you get to the molecular level, you're looking at literally trillions and trillions and trillions of cells and parts that come together to make this singular chair. So it's not an absolute oneness. It's a comprised oneness. It's comprised of a bunch of other parts. And everything we know of, literally everything we know of, is a singularity. It's comprised of a bunch of other smaller units. Everything. The atom, subatomic particles, everything is made up of things smaller than it. Right? Now, the fact that something is a comprised oneness, in and of itself tells you it's not the beginning. Because the parts have to have been there before it to come together to be it. I know this chair is not it's not a chair that's always existed, because I know trees have to have predated, the fabric had to have predated it, and so on. So everything I look at, I can say, okay, there's a bunch of different things that predate it for it to be. So it's not the first starting point. So the starting point from which everything else exists, all complexity exists in our world, everything in our world is complex. In the sense that it's made up of a bunch of different things and all come together, they're all integrated, it's a whole ecosystem, it's a very vast and complex system, right? And so it cannot be the beginning. The truth is that the Big Bang Theory is posited on the same philosophy. You have to go back to a simpler beginning, because you can't just start off with complexity. Complexity implies there's something before it, from which these complex matters can be put together. So you have to go before, back. Hence the idea of evolution. Hence the idea of we're going to come to the simplest form of existence we know of food, particles, and that's where everything started. Okay, that's still complexity. It's still made up of 2. What came before it? We haven't got there yet, right? But the concept actually scientifically is coming closer toward God, not farther from God, because they're coming closer to the notion that at the beginning there was a singular, non-complex truth from which all of the complexity is created. That's the oneness as Rambam describes it. Obviously, let's talk about the Big Bang Theory. Let's talk about evolution. But the notion that the starting point has to be a non-complex oneness, has to be an absolute oneness. Non-comprised, not made up of parts. It just is. Which means it's non-definitional. As soon as you give a definition, you're describing parts. As soon as you give a definition, as soon as you give dimension, you're right away giving it parts. You describe a person and all of its personality. You're describing the various parts of that make up this person. You describe a chair, you're describing the parts. It's so high, it's such color, it feels such and such a way, and when you sit on it, it feels like this, it creaks like that. You're describing all of its various different parts. So the moment you give something definition or dimension, you're now giving it complexity. It's made up of parts. It's not the beginning. And so therefore, God is, at the beginning, a singular, absolute singularity. Achtus Pshuta. Simple singularity. Uncomplex, not made up of parts. Okay, this is Rambam. Now comes Chassidus and says, okay, that simplicity, where does it exist? Where does the singularity of Hashem's existence exist? Where does it exist? If you stop that Rambam, you could imagine that you could stop and believe that God is the unmovable mover, as the words of Aristotle. It's a similar kind of philosophy where God is the first cause that is simple and uncomplex, and we are like 100 trillion different causes later from this simple, uncomplex beginning, which decided for whatever reason to produce something, and that something produces something else, produces something else, produces something else, till finally, trillions of causes later, you have Levi Nu. You have this complex world, which really makes us extremely far from the truth of that simplicity. Because we are the product of mass complexity. Even if I can logically deduce that it begins at a simplicity, that it begins at an absolute oneness, but I'm very distant from it. So comes Chassidus and says, if that's where I stop, then I'm missing something. Because what that means is the oneness actually isn't absolute, because it stops at a certain point. The oneness is here, but now complexity starts. So now creation starts. Now there's something else. And as soon as you have an other, then the oneness itself is compromised because it has a limitation. It exists, yes, but I give it some definition because it stops here. It doesn't bleed into the complexity. Right? Following this problem? It's an inherent problem, which is, or another way of putting this problem is, how does the simplicity produce complexity? I produce complexity because I made up a bunch of different parts. So when I use the different parts that I am, I can produce different things. Right? The tree is made up of different components. I can cut it down to different shape and make different things that I want. If it doesn't contain the potential in it, it's not going to happen. Trees don't contain metal. I'm never going to make a nail out of it. Whatever it contains, that's what I can produce. But if this simplicity doesn't contain anything, so then why is it producing anything? Another way of saying this is, how do you go from infinite to finite? If it's infinite, why is anything finite being produced? If it's non-defined, simple, uncomplex, no dimensions, no definition, then why is anything being produced? Inherently, there's an infinite barrier, separation, that brings a chasm between the infinite and the finite, between the simplicity and the complex. So this is an inherent conundrum that many of the Jewish philosophers and Kabbalists struggle with. Even Rambam himself to some degree deals with this problem, but certainly post-Rambam you'll find this discussion in Jewish philosophy and Kabbalah and Chassidus. So without going through the whole chain of events of how we got to the end, but the end of it is that the Chassidus comes to the following conclusion. That the complexity of the world, the complexity of our reality, is not simply produced by the simplicity of Hashem, but actually every part of the complexity itself is the simplicity of Hashem, just choosing to manifest in a different way. So it's not as if the different parts that come together in creation, here's one thing, here's another thing, and they're in competition with each other and trying to work together to create some sort of cohesiveness. They are all simply just an expression of and exist within the absolute oneness of the truth of Hashem. He just decided this is going to be this way, this is going to be that way. Hold on. Sorry?
We know that today.
Listen what Chassidus is explaining for us. Another way to say this is, and this is coming to the point of KELIPAH. When we look at something, and whether or not Hashem is revealed in that thing, or Hashem is concealed in that thing, it's both Him. Not in spite of the concealment. In spite of the concealment, Hashem is still there. That's a mistake. That would mean concealment exists as something distinct from Hashem Himself. Despite the concealment, He's there. No. The concealment itself is Him. That's the true oneness of Hashem. And the complexity itself is not just produced by the absolute oneness of Hashem, but it itself is an expression of the oneness of Hashem. And the oneness of Hashem is pervaded throughout all of existence, whether you see it or don't see it, whether it's this version or that version. It's all going to be just the oneness of Hashem. which means like this. So this is somewhat of a summary of part 2 of Tanya, which means like this. The fact that Hashem is not visible is not a fake reality. Tzimtzum is not a fake reality. Tzimtzum is not a lie. It's not a lie that Hashem is concealing himself. That would imply that there's something outside of him that has some control over whether he's visible or not visible. The fact that Hashem is tzimtzum, the fact that Hashem conceals himself, is just as true as it being revealed somewhere. It's not less real. It's not less true. And that's where things get its nature. The reason why nature is such that nature doesn't change is precisely for this reason. Because nature itself is not a lie. It's the way Hashem made it. This is another version of Hashem's expression where he's not seen somewhere. So nature is not an aberration from the truth of Hashem. It is the truth of Hashem. Right? Sorry?
Nature infinite? Is it both infinite?
No.
It's Hashem.
The point is, finite itself is the truth of Hashem. That's what I'm saying. It's not the pshat.
It contain Hashem and Hashem.
It didn't contain Hashem. It's an expression of Hashem.
Contained in Hashem.
It's not. That's the point. It's not
As we were saying, how
the complexity, which means the definition. The finitude is itself Hashem himself. Right? Not despite the finitude, Hashem is there anyway. The finitude itself, the finitude, the concealment, the nature, tzimtzum, all these the complexity, they're all words for the same thing. They're all definition things that aren't Hashem, that aren't the absolute transcendent truth of Hashem. But that too is the truth of Hashem, is the point. Not in spite of the concealment, in spite of nature, in spite of the finitude. But the finitude itself is him. The complexity itself is him. The concealment itself is him. Nature itself is him. The oneness of Hashem is within all. Even within that which, not just within in concealment because it's hiding behind concealment, but the concealment itself is him too. The absolute oneness of Hashem being reflected in every single thing that exists, including the limitation, including the complexity. It's mind-blowing. It's mind-bending. And every time you think about it, it should break your head because it's inherently impossible to appreciate.
But it makes everything so simple.
It makes everything so simple because all just you. Like, but which means, sorry.
No, in reality, it makes functions Shaila even bigger. If it's
Explain.
also a piece of Hashem, meaning even the unkosher food, it's a form of concealment. It's still part of Hashem.
Okay.
How does
I don't think that's what he was asking.
No, I know.
But I'll tell you what I think you're asking.
Right.
So now this is where we are, which is, okay, so what's the difference between Klippa and Kedusha?
Yeah, exactly.
So on the one hand,
yeah,
So on the one hand, what's the difference between Klippa and Kedusha? It's all just you anyway.
exactly.
On the other hand, what happens is as follows. Everything has to be exactly the way it is, because you're the one that has it this way.
For sure.
So how does anything become anything else? It doesn't. This is where nature gets its rigid form from. If it was just an expression of infinite, right, and nature was this aberration that concealed the infinite, then nature is just like this thing that's waiting to fall apart and reveal the truth of infinite. That's not what this is. Then nature itself is the doing of Hashem. Hashem himself is invested in the doing of nature. So it's not waiting to fall apart. This is it. Tzimtzum itself is Hashem. So the fact that the rigidity of nature, that everything has to be stuck the way it is not an aberration of Hashem's truth. That's another expression of his truth. So if something is created as such that it does not reveal Hashem's truth, then that's the way it is. This is the way Hashem expressed himself. He expressed himself here in such a manner that he's not going to be seen. And if that thing seemingly is stuck as is,
Kosher food.
are just different. And which means even more. The kosher food itself shouldn't be able to express Hashem. Because Hashem created kosher food, all this physical planet, to not reveal him. So why is something all of a sudden revealing him? It shouldn't. If it was lying about concealing him, okay, so we're waiting for the lie to fall apart. But it's not true. It's a truth. You created the world such that here you're expressed in a manner that you're not seen. Then that's the way it is. That's how you expressed yourself. So really, the kosher food shouldn't be elevated either. You following? The moment something says which everything in our world does. The moment anything in our world says, I exist and I am here, that sentence is inherently a klipa sentence. But it's not, the truth is, it's not I'm here. Hashem is here. Now, Hashem decided that his fashion of being here is going to be such that I say I am here. That's how he decided this existence is going to be. And that's the way it is. So, right, my point, what are we trying to get to? It's a lot of fancy words. What are we trying to get to? Trying to get to is like this. Is that klipa, even before you elevate it, is not a contradiction to God's reality. It's not a contradiction to God's reality. It's God's reality as he chose to be concealed. So the problem is not God. The problem is me. But the problem is the people who live in this reality where Hashem presents himself in such a fashion is not seen. But as far as Hashem is concerned, there's no problem in klipa. It poses no issue. Not less him. There's no such thing as less him. That would be a limitation on him. If some area is less him than somewhere else, then that would be a limitation on him. That means here he's simple and here he's not because he's complex. There's this thing that stops and says you can't come here. That's not true of Hashem. The problem is on my end. I live in this reality that was created in which there are revealed and concealed. So I live in a world of Kedusha and Klipa. So the distinction between Kedusha and Klipa is not really on Hashem's end. It's on my end.
You created that to give us a choice.
To give us free choice. So the chidush, that's what I think they're saying here is the novelty here is that you even have that choice. Because in reality, everything should be stuck as it is. This is the way Hashem made it. That's the way it is. If something exists as a klipa, if the kosher food, which says, here I am, I take up space, that sentence, here I am, I take up space, which is totally kosher, that sentence is a klipa. That means it's an existence that does not reveal Hashem as per Hashem's choice. It conceals Hashem as per Hashem's choice. Then that's the way it should be, period. The fact that as a human being, I'm an aberration that has this capacity to be able to say, no, okay, you declare that you're not Hashem, no, I'm going to make you declare Hashem. Hashem made you as such that you can, that he is expressed in concealment, and now he's going to be expressed in revelation, not concealment. That's an aberration from nature. That's an aberration from nature. You following this?
He did not to test us.
Right, but that's true, but I want you to understand what's happening.
Yeah.
What's happening? It's not a game of like, okay, look, I'm high now. Oh, I'm here. Where's a lie? No. It's a flip on the one hand. It's a conundrum. On the one hand, it's an absolute real reality. Hashem created it such that it conceals it, and you can't change it. On the other hand, it's a real reality. It's a real reality that Hashem's not here. That's not a real reality that Hashem's not here. It's only a real reality that Hashem's not here because Hashem decided to be here in such a fashion that he's not here. Because he really is there. He's there in such a fashion that he's not here. That's what gives it its realness. So even the reality of it not being revealed is only a reality of his presence. Not a reality of something else that conceals him. It's a reality of his presence that says, I'm concealed here. Following? Okay. We're getting late, but we'll try to get some more words going tomorrow morning. Hope I get more clarity rather than more difficulty. Okay, tomorrow we'll get some more words, please. Good luck.